So I'm in a hybrid role. So one half of my role is working on Dove hair innovation. So really looking at the future of our portfolio. What are new innovations that we want to launch? What are competitors doing? What are gaps? What are things that are missing? So one example, just to kind of give you a flavor, is when I joined the team, I noticed that it's easy as someone who has curly textured hair, I noticed that we actually didn't have any Dove hair products focused on curls, coils, and waves. So part of my role was actually identifying how we were going to enter this space, what were the SKUs, what was the white space, working to design just the creative concept overall. So packaging, working with R&D, supply chain, et cetera, to launch from start to finish brand new innovations for Dove. So that's part of my role. And then the second half of my role, which I really, really enjoy, is really working on all of our purpose communication. So internally, we call it Dove Master Brand, but it's the arm of Dove that doesn't focus on product marketing. It's more when it's really about putting our purpose out there. So whether it was our response to COVID-19, to the Black Lives Matter protests, to our self-esteem program. We have a Dove self-esteem program that provides self-esteem education to young children, to legislative work that we're doing around hair discrimination and trying to end hair discrimination in the US. It's really the purpose arm of all the Dove work. So a lot of people think about the Real Beauty campaign, for example, the iconic campaign where we really were trying to dismantle how people think about women's bodies and showing that there really isn't one true ideal of beauty. And that's really what Dove as a brand stands for, is trying to push the narrative and change the narrative around beauty inclusivity so that all women, regardless of their size, shape, skin tone, hair texture, feel beautiful.
Awesome. Love that. And I would imagine that Gen Z is a very important audience for a lot of that work. So before we kind of dive into how kind of Dove goes about reaching and engaging Gen Z, I did a little bit of, prep in advance of this call. According to Pew Research, so they're obviously the newest generation, sometimes called Zoomers. So this is the 6 to 24 years of age person. So my daughter almost qualifies. She's 5. And this is a group of workers who they kind of had it really great. They were inheriting this comfy economy, but then all of a sudden the pandemic came and they were kind of hit pretty hard by it. They've been more susceptible to job loss. They're more diverse. They're more educated. They're digital native. So they've never existed without a smartphone, which is kind of crazy and makes sense why my daughter just tries to swipe our television. And then millennials, they tend to be kind of progressive and care really, really deeply and strongly about societal issues like racial inequalities and the environment. What I found kind of most interesting about that is just this idea that, this is a generation who were living this comfy kind of existence, growing economy, and then they've been really hit the hardest with the pandemic and almost, disproportionately negatively affected with job loss. So they have this sort of uncertain future. And then they have all of these really strong belief systems. How has that kind of played into how Dove goes about connecting with them?
Yep. So I think even when we look at all the different cohorts, of whether it's millennials, boomers, Gen Z, we find that the Gen Z consumer is the most skeptical. They're the ones where we really need to work to earn their trust, prove kind of that we're walking the walk, and not just talking the talk. And I also think the way they define value, it's no longer just price and quality, but they really take this idea of value a step further. So they want a brand that stands for more. They want a brand, and you might say, doesn't everyone want that? But when we really peel back and look at the numbers, we see that Gen Z, more than anyone else, ranks highest in terms of wanting a brand that stands for more. So for them, value really is looking for a brand with purpose. Even when we talk, and that can be a lot of different things. It can be around environment, it can be around diversity. So even if you look at all these different cohorts, for example, when you say how important is it that the brand has diversity in front of the camera and behind? You'll see that the numbers are higher for Gen Z. Or if it's about having diverse leadership, these are all things that we find that Gen Z is really over indexing on compared to some of the other groups. And so, to be honest, this is an area that we're still working on. I think we have that trust because Dove has been a brand that for the Gen Z consumer, their parents grew up on. We have that trust, and so that's something that we're really working on. And I think, even this last year during lockdown, I think there's been moments that have allowed us to start doing some of those things and kind of building on the work that we've already done. And what we say for Dove is a lot of times we talk about this idea of brand say versus brand do. So we say we stand for diversity. We can say we stand for all shapes and sizes, but what does that do? What is that action behind the communications, the marketing, et cetera, that we're doing? But just as an example, a number of brands responded to George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter protests this summer, and Dove put out a very powerful campaign called America the Beautiful. And a lot of our campaigns you'll see all tie back to this idea of beauty and our idea of what beauty and beautiful looks like. And it was this idea that America won't be beautiful until it's beautiful for everyone. And in addition to this campaign that we launched, we also announced that we'd be donating $5 million over the next 5 years to help uplift the next generation of young Black girls and boys. We've been working on developing different tools to help with building self-esteem and helping with the next generation. And so not only was it that we had this campaign, but also putting action behind what we're doing. And I think that's something that we look, whenever we are launching something, we ask ourselves, what's that actual do? What is the work that we're doing behind that campaign versus just showing images of diversity?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the pandemic, the events of the past year, I think they've all kind of culminated. And we, I think, as a world have realized whether you're an individual, whether you're a business, a brand like Dove, we all have a responsibility to do our part. And it has to go beyond, saying something or standing for something. It has to go to that action. And I love those examples because I think that when you can live out, when you can not only talk the talk, but walk the walk, that's when you can authentically connect. And I think that when, the pandemic kind of first hit last year, we saw a lot of brands kind of turning to delivering those messages of value and those empathetic campaigns and demonstrating that they were walking the walk. And I'm not saying this because you're Dove, but I loved the Courage is Beautiful campaign, which was, for those of you not familiar, it was these kind of raw and gritty pictures of frontline workers. There was one of that's kind of ingrained in my memory of the nurse who pulled off her mask, and it was like she had the imprint on her face. And then I also really thought, we actually highlighted this as a best in class example in one of our presentations we did, the Dove commercial where you just ask people to wash their hands. You spent a 30-second spot just saying, what we need you to do is wash your hands and help prevent the spread of the virus. And just kind of being something provocative that encourages people to lean in and reduce virus transmission and do their part. So I want to know, what was your favorite campaign? And it can be Dove or otherwise from this past year, and why?
I actually think, I have a couple from Dove, but I think, so I'll give two. One's more of a true campaign, and it is the Courage is Beautiful example. I think what I loved about that was, I think most brand and marketers will say that they're used to, having this long window of planning 6 months in advance. You have your big moment, your big campaign that you've been working on. You research that insight. It's very, very thought out. And I said to many people that I talked to, I was like, this is such an incredible, I loved work during the pandemic, but I know a lot of people had varying experiences, but I think to work on a brand like Dove that allowed me to kind of scrap all the plans and all the things that we had for the year and take a step, which is, by the way, something hard for a brand like Dove to do, but to say, let's respond to what's happening in culture, and let's do it quick, let's do it fast. It might not be the polished look and the campaigns that we're used to, but it's really about that story and that emotional connection. And it's fine if it's not your typical production. And so I think what Courage is Beautiful was an example of, if you go and look, it's people's pictures and selfies that they took themselves. Like I remember literally texting people like, do you know people who are nurses? Do you know people? So I think what was exciting was to see something that was so raw and simple, but yet still as powerful as something we, maybe had been planning for months and months, and was very much embedded in culture and what was happening at the moment. And I think that those are the types of things that Gen Z likes to see. And I think the more we can figure out how do we have more of those agility moments, I think the more successful we'll be. And then I think the second example, I would say, is more of like wasn't a campaign per se, but for those of you who might not be familiar, there was a short film called Hair Love that won an Oscar in February of 2020. So Matthew A. Cherry created this short film all around loving your hair. And Dove had contributed to the Kickstarter back, I want to say it was in 2017. It was something we did very quietly, more just because we believed in the mission of this film. And it wasn't, we had no idea it was going to win an Oscar. I'm like, if we could only handpick, all the future Oscar winning animated films or opportunities to get involved in. And so it was up for an Oscar. And around a couple weeks before the Oscar, we started hearing in the news about a young boy, his name is DeAndre Arnold, who was told by his school that he could not graduate unless he cut his locks. So because of the way his hair naturally grows from his head, his school felt that wasn't professional, that it wasn't up to their standards. And they said, you need to cut your hair. And that was something that was part of his heritage. Like he grew up with these locks. And what Dove has been working on is, and I kind of mentioned it briefly, is work on what's called the Crown Act. So it's legislation to end moments like this, to end race-based hair discrimination, so that schools and universities can't do things like this to tell people that they can't show up for work because of how their hair naturally grows out of their head. And we've seen many incidents. This is something we've been monitoring for quite some time. We have a great campaign that'll be coming out later on around this topic, where it really talks about the damaging effects of being told at a young age. Imagine if your son was told you can't graduate unless he cuts his straight hair, his brown hair, his whatever that is. And so what we did was we paired up with Matthew Cherry and actually sent DeAndre Arnold to the Oscars. And our message was, and it was great, it was able to generate a lot of PR and buzz, was that your school might not think you're deemed to walk for graduation, but we as a brand believe that you are fit to walk the red carpet for the Oscars. We got and he went with his mother as well. We got them celebrity stylists. We gave them the whole VIP experience to really take a stance on our view on hair discrimination. And again, continue this idea of championing all types of beauty. So I think that was a moment where it wasn't a true campaign, but it was, again, a response to something that was happening at that very point in time, and able to marry another partnership that Dove had worked on with Matthew Cherry and bring those two together to bring awareness to the topic of hair discrimination.
Talk about brand doing, passing legislation. And then, I think that is fabulous. I kind of have chills from that story. I also think, it shows that brands need to react to the moment. They need to be agile, and they need to find ambassadors to help them tell their stories. Obviously influencers are known for helping brands connect authentically, but choosing kind of the right ones to carry out that message for a brand, especially a brand like Dove, with such a legacy, can be extremely challenging. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's hard, I think, to do that. Watson Advertising, we have a social targeting solution that uses AI and AI's ability to understand natural language to find relevant influencers and relevant audiences for brands. What role does influencers play in Dove's larger marketing strategy, and how do you go about making sure that the influencers you select, if you do, are kind of aligned to your brand values?
So influencers play a huge role. So kind of when I was talking about the brand do versus brand say,
Mm-hmm.
we also talk about others say and others do. So
Okay.
how can we use others who
Mm-hmm.
are either, we call them Dove friendlies,
Mm-hmm.
to help amplify our message. And so that's kind of how we use influencers, is to get a neutral voice to help amplify our messages. And our approach is, we want to make sure we have influencers who reflect this idea of real beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to make sure that we have an influencer community, or what we call our Dove community, that is as diverse as the communications that we talk about. So finding, and also they're speaking on the issues that we care about. So finding influencers who are championing body inclusivity, or
Mm-hmm.
hair discrimination, or talking about self-esteem, or even sustainability. So making sure that their own community and their page is reflective of our brands and our beliefs. And then also making sure that we're not just picking influencers who look the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's making sure we have a breadth of races, body types, background, religion, and so that we really have a community that is representative. And then in addition, we've also made sure that we don't just have these one-off relationships. So we have someone for this one campaign and then we don't ever use them again. We've started to move towards really nurturing those relationships and building upon them year over year. So influencers that we used last year, we will continue to use this year. And I think that actually helps, because they then get to understand the brand tone of voice, what we stand for, and they're even more excited to work with us because their beliefs align with ours.
Mm-hmm.
So the work that I do with the influencers, again, we aren't really pushing product. It's more around sharing these purpose messages. So one of our most successful influencer campaigns last year was when we actually had our influencer community talk about different stories around their hair and moments of whether it might not have been something as severe as being told you can't walk for your graduation, but just sharing those personal stories to help bring awareness to the Crown Act and the legislative work that we're trying to do.
Love that. So I want to pivot the conversation a little bit to talk about some of the changes kind of at play right now in the media and marketing industry. Lots of disruption. We know that changes, we have ongoing privacy regulations, making it more complex to kind of reach our audiences in relevant ways. We have also changes to identifiers happening. We have Apple making changes to its identification for advertisers, which will reduce the number of mobile users who opt in to have their information shared with advertisers. And then at the end of this year, we have Google eliminating third-party cookies. And what this all kind of boils down to is, as marketers, it's going to be harder to reach and engage consumers effectively. We're going to have to work, harder at that relationship. How will these changes and how are these changes impacting how you go about reaching, and engaging Gen Z?
So I think this is an area where we still have a lot of work to do to get ahead. I think even before all of these changes, reaching and engaging with the consumer has always been a challenge for all marketers. So I think the work that we've been doing will just it's just making things more challenging. I think it's about, so a lot when we hear about Gen Z is around these micro communities. So it's not just looking at the big communities on Instagram, but how do we create micro communities? And some of what we're doing, for example, even with the Crown Act, is we have created a whole day called Crown Day. We're going to have panels, a whole day of virtual experiences, but how can we create more of these micro moments so that we allow our consumer to truly experience our brand and participate and engage? And it's a two-way conversation versus us just putting out digital banners or social media ads, but finding things that are really rich in terms of conversation and community so that they feel like they're a part of it versus just watching. How can we create more moments to allow the Gen Z consumer to actually participate and engage with the brand? I think this is an area where we are still trying to figure out, with all these changes, what's next for the brand.
Absolutely. I think that I think brands will need to invest, more heavily into like those consumer relationships, find ways to kind of leverage their first party data, but do it in ways that protect the consumer and make them feel trusted and continue to engage in those authentic ways. At IBM Watson Advertising, we see artificial intelligence as a really important, essential tool kind of in our industries go forward. Because the future landscape is likely going to be fragmented. There's likely going to be challenges reaching consumers across screens, and so because AI can work across environments, because it can in real time make sense of all data sets, and help marketers further enhance their first party data. We see a lot of value that it can bring to the table. What role do you see advanced technology like AI kind of playing in your strategy, or are there any different types of platforms that you're exploring?
I think as we think about representation and this idea of beauty, I think AI will really help push and challenge that. Again, not just showing the same images of women, but how do we use different technologies to start expanding this conversation around representation? I know when we talked separately, you guys had a lot of great things you were doing in the space that I think made me excited and wanted to learn, because I think this is something that is a new area for us. And so I think what you're doing on the IBM side was quite insightful and actually made me start thinking of new ideas that we might be able to implement.
Yeah, like when you were talking before about the Courage is Beautiful campaign and why you liked it, because it was one of these quick turn, campaigns where you use real-time insights to inform and get in market and, react to a mindset and a need. We're focused on kind of helping shorten that creative process so that brands can be empowered to serve that right message based on real-time data signals. One solution that we offer is called IBM Watson Advertising Accelerator. And it's sort of a predictive creative technology like DCO, but much better. It leverages real-time data signals to, including, weather, time of day, device type, along with the client's first party data, to predict and assemble relevant creative for relevant audiences. And we're seeing brands have tremendous, results. We actually, at the onset of the pandemic last year, opened this technology up to advertisers who were interested in going to market with their purpose-driven campaigns. They knew that, if they went out with a wrong message, it could backfire, much more significantly. That impact would be felt. And so we wanted to help them with that. And we had some great participation from brands like Kimberly-Clark and MasterCard and the Ad Council. And in addition to kind of helping them achieve some great performance boosts over time, because the product learns over time based on real-time engagement data, we help these brands achieve a lot of insights that they then, leverage to inform their other activity. For example, the Ad Council learned that warmer colors resonated best with their audience versus cooler colors, and they're using those insights to inform sort of what they, how they message and design their homepage and things like that. So there's a lot of value, and especially because these solutions can function without cookies. and kind of tap into the massive and disparate data sets that are growing, there's a ton of advantage for marketers to start embracing them now, to kind of get ahead of the challenges up ahead. Are there any sort of new or emerging, like Clubhouse or different types of platforms, Snapchat, that Dove is looking at in terms of engaging this audience?
Well, first of all, last time we talked, I remember you mentioned the pilot for some of the purpose brands. So I want to make sure Dove is on the list for the next.
You were absolutely on the list, and following this, we're going to get together and we're going to discuss it. So yes, yeah. Absolutely.
I needed it to be on the record.
Got it.
I'm really fascinated by Clubhouse and the role, that brands can play there. And I noticed, I think it was within the last couple of weeks, they actually started hiring. There was a new media hire, a new marketing hire. So I'm curious to see the role that brands are going to play, because right now it's not heavily branded. But I would love to do something in the Clubhouse space. I think for me, that's one of the platforms that I really have my eye on, especially when it comes to purpose messaging, because it allows you to have that dialogue and that conversation. So awesome. Hopefully there will be an opportunity for us to get involved from the Dove side on Clubhouse.
Love that. Okay, so I am going to open up the chat, and we have some great questions that the audience has come in with. First one I want to start with you is, as a marketing professional, what do you spend the most time doing in your job? And whether or not you like that or not, but what do you wish you could spend more time doing?
I wish I could spend more time just thinking about like some of the stuff we're talking about, to be honest. I think so often there's a lot of cross-functionals we're meeting with on the brand side. We really are kind of the hub. So we're connecting the media plans, the PR plans, now some of the legislative strategy. There's lots of moving pieces. And so that means lots of meetings, lots of connects, making sure we're connecting the dots, making sure that what we're doing in the US ladders up to what we're doing globally, making sure all of our different campaigns, whether that's Courage is Beautiful, America the Beautiful, some of the new things that we have coming up this year, all tied together. It's a lot of meetings and a lot of emails and a lot of back-to-back. I almost wish I could take like a fake vacation, more fake.
Totally.
Just like a day where I'm actually working, and I can just think, and it not be a weekend. But more time just to take a step back, because I think it's easy to be so go. And I mean, even right now we are planning for 2022, but we're still working on our plans for 2021. But more time to just digest and kind of do some of that big pie in the sky thinking.
Yeah, it's like you're fixing the car while it's still running, and you got to keep it all going on the tracks. I completely hear you. At Watson Advertising, we implemented an internal meeting free day on Wednesdays. So I'll let you know how that goes. But yeah, it's that idea, it's that time to think and to be creative. And that's why one of the reasons, and not to be too salesy, is why I am very bullish on artificial intelligence, because I think if we can get it to automate the things, the mundane tasks, the things that are taking our time, and free us up for those like higher value, creative brainstorm things, we as humans will add so much more to the table, and there will be so much more creativity that I think our industry can experience. But awesome answer. Thank you. Okay. This actually I found so interesting. Dove recently announced that it was dropping the word normal from its beauty products. I don't know if you're okay. Why do you think this was an important change to make?
So this was actually not just Dove. It was, unless I'm remembering, but yeah, it was a company-wide, Unilever-wide idea. But just trying to push this idea of what is normal. And a lot of this is actually in line with what we talk about from a Dove perspective. But when we talk about normal hair or normal skin, what does that mean? I think it was more of a challenge onto us to think about those descriptors and really move away from this idea of what quote unquote normal is. Now, some people have pushed back and said, but I do have normal skin. Like, it's helpful knowing when it's for quote unquote normal skin. But again, I think it's really trying to think about the terms and the way we describe things to move away from this idea of normal.
Right. Totally. And sort of a long, very related, Marketing Dive and Adweek recently covered how Dove paid other brands. I think it was in South Africa, Dove extension, to diversify their ads. Can you tell us a little more about that initiative?
Yeah, so I cannot take the credit for that great work, but it is part of the Dove family. So, but yeah, but basically, Dove, we worked with the agency, but we did a number of different casting calls with diverse models, who might not have typically been receiving all the casting calls that they were hoping to get. And we worked with them to create these videos. And then we reached out to brands and made the announcement that if you use any of these models in your advertisements, we will actually help subsidize the fee. Again, to help encourage others to put diverse people in front of the camera. And so there are examples of companies and brands that have used these models, which is quite exciting. It was featured in Ad Age. It's been receiving a lot of really positive buzz and pickup.
Yeah, love that. Again, it's brand doing, it's not brand saying. So right in line. Exactly. Are there any new Dove campaigns on the horizon that we should be on the lookout for? Or that you can talk about? Maybe you can't.
Yes. I'm like, what can I talk about? Someone from PR is gonna like see this and get slapped on the wrist. So I think kind of in line with Gen Z, I mean, we have a campaign that's really going to be talking about there's a lot of positive effects of social media, but there's also a lot of negative. I mean, we are growing up, and doesn't just have to be Gen Z, but you see these images of people that are so perfect, no blemishes, and you don't realize all the digital distortion that goes beyond and behind those images. And so we're going to be doing some work to really illuminate and start discussions around the impact of a selfie. Like, what does that mean for this Gen Z consumer who has grown up with this idea of the perfect selfie? Like, when I look at pictures of myself at that age, they're quite different than what I'm seeing online. So we're going to be doing, we'll have some campaigns around that. And then also some exciting work around this idea of as early as 5, this idea of for young Black children, when they leave their safe space of their home around early as 5, what are some of those microaggressions they start experiencing, and really telling the story behind that. So that will be coming out a little bit later in the year.
So cool.
And then we have a couple exciting partnerships, but because I want to keep my job, I'm going to keep it.
You keep your job. So Patty Marrero asked, first she's compliments, great insights shared, Erin. Thank you. You mentioned your AA strategy. What is Dove doing in the social space to authentically reach Hispanics?
Yep, so that's, to be quite honest, we literally talked about this yesterday. That's an area of opportunity, something that we want to focus on a bit more, whether that's Afro-Latina or just the whole Latinx community. As we're talking about, I think it's an area we haven't done enough of. So that's literally had a whole brainstorm 2-hour meeting yesterday. So again, more to come there, but it's definitely something that is going to be a key focus for us.
Love it, love it. So what is your biggest challenge as a brand marketer?
I mean, there's so many great brands doing great things. There's lots of distractions. I think it's finding a way to connect with your consumer in a way that matters to him or her. Making sure that we, a lot of times when we talk about Dove, people reference some of our campaigns from years and years ago. How do we continue to, what is that next real beauty campaign? What is that next iconic campaign? I think for a brand, I wanted to work on Dove because it was an iconic brand and known for these big moments. But you're only as good as your last show. How do we continue to create those moments and make them relevant for the time? So what is real beauty? What does that real beauty campaign look like for the Gen Z consumer?
Awesome. All right. So we have our last question. And I think this will be good because it's why did you go into a career in marketing? But I'm going to expand it to say, Why did you go? And also, what is any advice you'd give to someone interested in going to marketing?
So for me, and I mean, I feel like I wanted to be able to change the images of what we're seeing out there. I think I realized that as a brand, we really do have the opportunity to